Hey guys, it's Carla. Today I want to show you how to paint faux wood on canvas. I'm using an 8x10 canvas panel, but you can use any size for this. I'm using acrylic paint. On my palette I've got white, burnt sienna, raw umber, and black. And later on I'll be adding raw sienna because I decided to add a different flavor to it. Okay, so I'm using a ruler to just make semi-level lines. You don't have to be real specific with this because it's meant to look like old wood, so you know, if you get them a little crooked or they're not the same size or whatever, that's perfectly fine. All right. The first thing I'm doing is picking up some water on a fan brush and making a glaze. And I'm going to cover the whole canvas with that thin glaze. And this will kind of give it some warmth. And you can use different colors than what I've got if you want like a lighter wood or a more yellow wood or a more white wood or whatever. You know, there's all different colors. And because this is a glaze, it's not going to cover up my pencil lines. So I want to smooth it out, kind of get all my brush strokes going in the same direction. I don't know what's going on with my voice. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I've got in my hand right there is a cut up plastic card, like you can use a credit card or whatever. I kind of use it as almost like a palette knife, but I've got it cut to where I've got different sizes of sides on it, but you can use a palette knife for this. And again, this doesn't have to be super straight or anything because it's just gaps in the wood, and sometimes there's bigger gaps in places than others. Now right here I'm barely touching the canvas. Just not even the weight of the brush. I'm kind of holding the weight up a little bit. I just want to kind of smooth those out a little bit. So I've rinsed my brush, and I'm using the edge of the brush to keep an edge at the top, but then I want to kind of blend it out at the bottom so that it's not just a hard line. And while since I'm picking up the black on my brush, I'm using that black to kind of create wood grains. I'm not done it yet, but here we go. You know, those wood grains you see in in wood, and a lot of these are going to get covered up because I'm going to be doing a lot more to it, but this shows you how to create that wood grain. And I want to do the same thing on the top side. So now I've cleaned my brush and I'm picking up some brown. And just, I don't know if you can tell right here, but I'm almost laying my brush down. So I'm using the side of the brush to put this brown in so that I don't get hard lines. And again, barely touching the canvas. Now I always like to make the edges darker where it looks like it's more weathered on the edges. But you don't want to do that in a straight line. You know, you want to kind of feather it out into the middle in places. You can put as much of this in as you want, depending on the look that you want. Now I'm picking up a little bit of that black that's still wet on the edge of my brush and putting in some, I guess, holes in the wood or knots, or just making it look more weathered. Make sure you get the edges of each board darkened. wooden signs are really a popular way to decorate these days. So this is handy, especially since wood is so expensive now. You can just kind of make a $1 piece of canvas panel look like wood. So I've cleaned my brush and I'm picking up a little bit of black and dabbing most of it off. I just want to put some more dark spots in. Now for most of this, I'm just using the corner of the fan brush instead of the whole width of it, because if you use the whole width of it, then sometimes you get that arched shape, and you can tell the fan brush has been there. So again, just work this until you like the look. Now I've cleaned the brush and I'm picking up a little bit of white and mixing it with some brown for a highlight color. And it just kind of gives it, again, a little different flavor. Most of these steps, you want them to be subtle so that it doesn't look too fake. So now I'm using almost pure white. I've mixed it with a little bit of that light brown mixture, but it's almost pure white. And this is for the tops of the boards. So I'm imagining that light is coming from above and shining down on it, so it's gonna those top edges of the boards will pick up light. all of what I'm doing here is a very light touch, so don't get too heavy-handed with it. I'm just kind of skimming around and putting in some little highlights where the wood is textured. Okay, now I'm drying it, and what I'm about to do is add a little yellowish tint to it. Now, if you like this more cedar-like look, then you can avoid this next step. And it doesn't change it a lot once the glaze that I'm about to put on is dry. It doesn't really change it a lot, but it takes away some of that reddish color. So I'm putting out some raw sienna, and I just want to make a glaze with that. No, I'm not doing the glaze yet. I forgot about this step. Putting in a few more highlights before I do the glaze. As you know, when acrylic paint dries, it kind of loses its vibrancy. So once I dried it, I felt like the highlights needed to be a little brighter. I'm making up all of this as I go, so sometimes I change my mind. All right, so here's the glaze. I put some water down, mix some yellow with it, some of that raw sienna. And I'm just lightly going over the whole thing. It looks really yellow right now, but once it dries, you can barely tell that I did it. But it does kind of tone down that red look a little bit. But you might like the red look. Try not to get any of that white in it, because then it won't be transparent. Okay, so again, when this dries, it'll be, oh, what am I doing here? Oh, I'm putting in some really bright highlights. And since I'm not using a brush, I can do it while this is still wet. If you were using a brush, it would just kind of blend it into that glaze and it not be real obvious. But since I'm using the straight edge, it goes on bright. If you mess up like I did right there, you can scoop some of it off, and then when I come back with my black again, I can fix that. And notice I'm not going all the way across on every board. I'm just kind of hitting some highlights here and there. Okay, now I'm doing what I did earlier. I'm using the edge of the brush to kind of keep it sharp at the top, keep it that hard line at the top, but then the side of the brush kind of smooths out kind of blends it into the rest. I'm ad-libbing again, just when I see a spot that I don't like, I just put some color in it. One thing to keep in mind is if your lettering is going to be a light color, then your wood needs to be dark enough for it to show up. And if your letters are going to be dark, then you need a light wood. Now I'm going on the bottoms of the boards and kind of darkening them, just like I highlighted the tops of the boards because they're picking up light. And I guess in my mind the bottoms of the boards would be more shaded. You have to be careful when you're doing this with it wet, because it's easy to lift the paint off, especially if you're a little too heavy-handed. So if you need to dry it, you can do that, and it might be easier to work with. just look it over and see if there's anything that you need to change. And it really helps to step back away from it and look at it. I didn't do that here, but it does help to do that with any painting. You get a better perspective on it if you're a few feet back. Okay, so now I've dried it, and I'm using a white chalk pencil to draw in my lettering before I paint it. And what I did, you may be writing a different word or whatever, but what I did was I Googled Faith font, and it gives you Faith written in different fonts, and I just chose one that I liked. So I'm assuming you can do that with any word. I don't know. Some of them may be on there and some may not. I'm going in now and just touching up, correcting anything that needs it before I put the permanent paint on, because this chalk will actually wipe off. Once your painting is completely dry, you can come back with a damp cloth and wipe off any chalk that's still showing. So keep that in mind later. So I'm using a little liner brush for this lettering. If you choose like a thicker font, then you could use a thicker brush, but I want to keep it thin. And obviously, if you're right-handed, start on the left. If you're left-handed, start on the right, so that you don't get your hand in your wet paint. Speaking of right to left or left to right, I just found out last night that the original Hebrew Bible was written from right to left. Like, I don't even know how you read that, but of course it was in Hebrew, but and it was also written without any punctuation whatsoever. So they had to, when they rewrote it where we could understand it, they had to add punctuation to it. Not sure why I never knew that. Now notice on the ends of these, like right there where I've got, where I'm starting at the end of a line, I'm kind of pressing down a little harder right there on the end so that it makes it kind of bubbles out right there. I just like that look. It's not that you have to do that, but I think it looks good like that. Notice I'm reloading my brush frequently because, you know, white is, it's a very opaque color, but sometimes it takes a lot of it to cover real good. So, and, you know, now I'm going back and putting a second coat on because of that. I don't know if you noticed in the reference photo that I put little dots under the line of the F and above the line of the H, and that's just something that I just chose to do. I just thought it would look good like that, but as you can tell, it looks fine without those too, so you don't really have to add those. But at this point, I'm just going through and brightening everything up, and then I'll add the dots, and then that will be it. So I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and all that if you haven't. And I hope you enjoy this one. Bye, guys.